Cost of renting versus buying a home comes up all the time. What is a better financial decision though? With renting, the total cost is just the amount of that you give to your landlord and you never see again. So for example, if your rent is $2,000 a month, multiple that by 12 months and you will have $24,000 a year that you never see again. The total cost of owning a home, however, includes a mortgage payment, which is the combination of interest and the principal, as well as the miscellaneous cost like maintenance per year. So to make an apple-to-apple comparison, we need to figure out how much money will never back again in both of the scenarios. The main thing that we're trying to solve for is of home ownership, and we need to get it to a monthly basis. So this way we can compare it to our rent cost and figure out which one is a better option for us. Theoretically, if our monthly payment home ownership is cheaper than renting a comparable home, then we should probably buy instead of rent. The vice versa should also apply. There are three components to home ownership, and figure out this whole monthly cost of calculation here. That includes the property tax, the maintenance costs, and as well as the mortgage payment. Mortgage payment will be broken into two different components, which we're going to discuss thoroughly today. However, all of these costs are associated with home ownership with the renter will not face. First, we need to talk about property taxes. So property taxes occurred on any property that you own, and basically what it means is by owning the property, you must owe the government or the province that you lived in a certain percentage of the property values in taxes every single year. Based on recent data for 2024 and 2025, there isn't a single official national property tax rate because property taxes in Canada are set at municipal level. However, the median residential property tax rate across major Canadian cities is approximately about 1.05%. So we're going to use that number in today's example. And we're also going to use the example of a $500,000 home. If you live in US, Australia, or somewhere in Europe, the tax rate might be different. However, for the purpose of today's video, let's just go with our example. So on a house like this, you are going to pay $5,250 in property taxes every single year. That's 1.05, and those are the costs you will never see again. The next cost is the maintenance cost of your home. Experts suggest that you set aside 2 to 3% of your property's value per year just for maintenance cost. Now, that could be more if your home is really old and you feel like it always needs fixing up. If you live in a strata complex like condos or townhouses, part of the maintenance for common area is through your strata fee, and the rest in your own unit is your own responsibility. For simplicity's sake, we are going to use 2% in today's calculation. So our maintenance cost for a $500,000 home over the course of a year is going to be 2% of that. So that's $10,000 per year. All right. So up until this point, we figure out the property taxes and the maintenance costs that we will never get back for owning a home. And that equals to about 3.05% per year of the property value. So next up, we actually need to figure out the cost of mortgage payment. What our money is actually costing us by putting it into a home. Assuming that a 20% down payment, that means you are going to finance or take out a loan on the remaining 80% of the home value. Using simple numbers, again, if our home value is $500,000, that means we're going to put a 20% down payment, which is $100,000 on the home, and the financing remaining $400,000, probably over the course of 30 years. That's the most common type of mortgage. So there are two moving parts here. The first one, the cost of a down payment, as well as what the loan is costing us. That's the cost of debt. A common thing that you will hear people say is that there is opportunity cost to your money. So basically, when you put the $100,000 on a down payment, then that means you're not going to put the $100,000 into the stock market to help you make more money. That's actually a pretty valid concern. And first, we need to figure out what the opportunity cost of your down payment is. And this is the first part of the cost of capital equation. So according to the data The S&P has returned for past 30 years about 7.19% average per year, adjusted for inflation. Residential real estate, or the median home prices in Canada over the past 30 years, we have actually appreciating 2.1 to 2.3% per year after accounting for inflation. I purposely use median home prices in this situation because if I had included commercial or rental properties, that would have screwed the real estate returns way higher. And since most people are renting a home and then comparing it to residential real estate, we should probably use residential real estate median price for simplicity's sake. If stocks are returning about 7% per year on average, and real estate is returning about 2% per year on average, then that means the difference between these two is around 5%. So stocks are outperforming real estate by 5% per year. So if we are using $100,000 on the down payment, that's $100,000 that could be earning 5% per year. Had you invested into the stock market, that's the money that you could be earning if it weren't invested into the home. So we will actually plug in some real numbers here soon, but first I just want to illustrate this concept. This is the first part of the cost of capital, or the cost of mortgage payment. Now, if you aren't in Canada, you can actually just simply Google what global real estate returns are, perhaps your own country's real estate returns are, and compare these to the S&P 500 or any stock market index that you have. What I found though is that stocks tend to outperform real estate depending on your country by around 3 to 5%. The second part of the capital equation is the cost that interest payment are costing you, or aka this is known as the cost of debt. Just for simple calculation today, we're going to assume that it is $16,000. That is 400,000 times by 4% per year. We will just use the straight up method of loan balance times the interest rate per year. And so this is going to give you a really conservative buffer on figuring out what type of homes that we could afford and just what are the costs that we don't get back. If you guys are still following here, then the cost of capital is then the opportunity cost of down payment, which we figured out was 5% of $100,000. That's $5,000 plus the $16,000 in interest payment per year. That's a total of $21,000 in cost every year that we don't get back. Represented as a percentage, we would take that $21,000 divided by the home value, and that's equal to 4.2%. All right, so now that we have all these numbers, let's add up everything we actually talk about already: the property taxes, the maintenance costs, and the cost of capital. And we will come up with a real simple rule. It is therefore the property tax of 1.05% plus the 2% maintenance cost plus the 4.2% cost of capital, and our total is 7.25%. We can use this 7.25% then as a quick and dirty, easy guideline to figure out what cost of home ownership looks like on a monthly basis. The rule here is to take the home price, multiply it by 7.25%, and then divide it by 12. That's the total cost of your home ownership on a monthly basis. So if you have a $400,000 home in your area, we would take that $400,000 number, multiply it by 7.25%, and that's actually give you the annual cost of home ownership, which is about $29,000. Now divided by 12, you will get $2,417. That's how much it would be costing you on a monthly basis in terms of the home ownership. So it is cheaper to rent a $400,000 comparable home in your area for less than $2,417 per month. That heavily tips the scale in favor of renting. Now, this rule is incredibly simple and lots of people will love it, but lots of people will also throw some hate on it as well. Now, it does help you set where break-even point is on a monthly basis, but it does have some flaws. There are some important considerations we should talk about that doesn't involve the math of buying a home as well. The first flaw that I see is the humans often time impulsive. Like there are times that I know it's not a great idea to buy a $7 latte, but I just go ahead and buy it anyways, just because there's an opportunity cost consideration of your capital. It doesn't mean that you don't have that down payment, that the renter is going to take that $100,000, that they might have it and invest it perfectly into the market and capitalize on their opportunity cost. Basically, investing takes lots of discipline, and you also have to play pretty perfectly. Who's to say that that renter is not going to take that down payment and go ahead and just put it on the black, maybe goal makes a 21 red. I don't even know what I'm talking about at this point, but you get the idea. Humans are irrational, not always perfect. So there is that view a mortgage payment as almost a forced saving method because you are accruing equity while you pay your monthly payment. That's going to be a really good thing for lots of Canadians out there who are not very good at saving in general. So on that topic of building equity today, we talk about the cost of interest as simple being the mortgage rate times your loan amount. In reality, mortgage doesn't work like that. Mortgages are on what's called an amortization schedule. That means at the beginning of the mortgage, you're actually paying less in equity and more in interest upfront. But as 30 years progress of the mortgage terms, there actually happens is you start to pay less in the interest and more in the equity as the mortgage goes on. So basically, it's at this point I'm kind of realize that your cost of equity and your cost of debt are always changing because of the variation of the amortization schedule. The second flaw. If you pair with the fact that there are also fixed terms mortgage out there, there's different type of variable rate mortgages out there, then we have lots of variables that we're not counting for in today's simple rule. Plus, at the end of the 30 years, the cost of interest is virtually gone. It's almost all equity. That will change the rule I talked about today considerably. And as well, there's another benefit or upside to buying over renting, which is at the end of 30 years. You actually have a tangible asset that could have appreciation in value over the time, and renters on the other side has been paying this monthly payment every single month. It has been going into their landlord's pocket and bank account, and they have never seen the fruits of that money. Third flaw that I see often with this rule is that it always assumes that the conditions are exactly same. Inflation could go crazy 1 year, which is actually has been, or perhaps your mortgage rate could double, or perhaps the opportunity cost of your equity is a lot different. That's definitely something to consider. There are also some pros to own a home without involving math calculation at all. The first is that you have a predictable fixed payment, especially with a fixed mortgage. Since your payment never actually changes too much, what you can actually do is budget for your mortgage payment accurately, whereas if you are renting, your landlord could jack up the price at any given moment. Another pro is that you have way more control when you own your place. So basically, if you make modifications or updates to your property, you don't have to run it by a landlord. You also have added security because the landlord isn't going to just evict you or kick you out because they sold their property to a different owner. The other nice thing about owning mortgage is that inflation actually helps you out. I know that this sounds a little bit counterintuitive, but basically what it means that all last dollars in terms of value over time. I'll give you a pretty extreme example here that doesn't really exist, but let's pretend for a moment that there was a 50-year fixed mortgage and that you bought your house 50 years ago. Now, before you come for me, I know there's no 50 years mortgage out there, doesn't even exist, and the 40-year mortgage is just a myth as well, but just entertain me for the sake of example. So 50 years ago, you got a 50-year fixed rate mortgage and your mortgage payment is $300 per month. Well, back then $300 a month is like $2,000 a month today. However, because of this fixed mortgage payment that you have still paying $300 a month for the entire life of the loan. And these days, I don't know about you, but $300 isn't seem like all that much. And that actually happens with normal 30-year mortgage, just on a smaller, less scale. And last, the biggest pro of owning a home is that you could see a tons of capital appreciation when it comes to your home value. Take a look at the example from one of the homes in our area that sold earlier this year. It sold for $93,000 back in 2005 and recently just sold in March this year for $449,000. So that clearly outperforms the median home price appreciation in Canada by a factor of at least 4.5 times more. Home ownership just isn't about the cost and this investment though. Obviously, sometimes it's just downright fulfilling to own your own home. There's a peace of mind knowing that you have a home to retire in and live for the rest of your life, especially while you have a capital to do so right now versus later in life. Now, I do want to point out there are some pros of renting, which I want to talk about. And the first is flexibility. You're not going to be tied down to a home in 30 years. So for some reason, if you live in the city right now and you want to leave next year or even next month, If you just want to break your lease, you can do that. The next one is, well, you don't owe taxes or maintenance or any type of costs like that. When you are renting, simply rent the place. Perhaps you have some renters insurance, and that's it. Life is just a lot simpler in that regard. And lastly, you can also get access to some really great amenities by renting some big buildings, especially in the big cities. You will have concierge, so that's going to be nice for security, and you will have gyms, they will have pools, going to have different places for barbecuing, holding events and stuff like that. And you're just not going to get where when you own a home. The biggest takeaway that I have for you guys today is that you need to run your own numbers when it comes to renting versus buying a home, especially if you are trying to figure it out for your own location. However, with 7.25 rule today, I think that you should be pretty financially equipped to figure out the situation on your own. With mortgage rate around 4% in Canada as of right now, really, it looks really like renting is going to be a much more appealing than owning a home, especially in the short time period. However, if you're staying in the place for more than 5 to 8 years and you're actually buying a home, I think that actually has the greatest potential for the most amount of upside in terms of an investment. All right, I hope that you found this video helpful. You did, make sure to subscribe this channel and also check my next video and let me know what you guys thought in the comments about the renting versus buying. And by the way, if you are going to buy a home shortly and you want to sit down with me for a one-on-one consultation, please click in the second link in the description below. The spots are limited. Just grab one before they're all gone. I will see you in the next video.